Starting a business is not easy, and it's not supposed to be either. See, the problem is that finding an idea interesting and being able to actually execute on it are two completely different things. These observations will give birth to new knowledge, which eventually will become your unique way of doing things. Marketing is truly one of the best skills that one can learn. If you have done something 100 times, you are then capable of building a realistic expectation. The better you are at understanding the psychology of marketing and the more comfortable you are with it, the easier it becomes to not only start but grow as well. You are becoming an entrepreneur. That is not easy. There hasn't been a better time to start a business. There's so many interesting ideas out there, so many videos on YouTube to learn from, so many tech and AI tools to automate things, and of course, the internet to reach the customers you need from all over the world. But somehow, it still isn't easy. Like if you watch a video on a certain type of business and you get really pumped with the idea, and you go down the rabbit hole, watch a few more videos, and now you're convinced, but then you never get around to start working on the idea. And even if you take the first step, you find it's way more complicated than how it was shown in the videos. See, the problem is that finding an idea interesting and being able to actually execute on it are two completely different things. We all think that we just need to work on the idea, follow the steps, and that's it. What most people miss is the work you got to do on yourself. You are becoming an entrepreneur. That is not easy, and this is precisely why most people give up and blame the idea or someone or the time or something else. So instead of another 10 steps to start a business or 10 side hustles for 2024, this video is about how to be someone that can start a business. For example, we'll go over certain perspectives that is needed to set the expectation properly, which is very important in the start, and also some best practices and mindset required for not just starting, but also be able to actually operate a business. These are things I learned along the way during the last 5 years of me operating the business, and I really think they'll help some of you that are really serious about making this leap. So if you have watched multiple videos and still don't have a business, this video might be able to get you to finally have one. Now, before we begin, I want to be crystal clear on one thing. Starting a business is not easy, and it's not supposed to be either. It is scary, it's hard, and it's tough beyond what you can currently comprehend. But it is doable, and with the right understanding, it eventually becomes not quite easy, but manageable. Nevertheless though, it's extremely rewarding and does give you a ton of self-satisfaction that is pretty difficult to attain from a 9 to 5. Sure, you can have a business where you work only 4 hours a week, control the schedule, live anywhere, and all that fun stuff, but it's never going to be like that when you start. So holding on to expectations like that will only frustrate you. All right, so if you're still interested, let's begin. Okay, so first, let's look at what a business is. Everyone knows how a job works, right? Progression in a job happens in a linear way. For example, you get promoted and you take on more responsibilities, and as a result, you earn more money. But let's look at a more horizontal progression. Imagine doing the same job, but for multiple individuals or companies. That there is a business. Hiring people, managing a team, operations and supply chain, all of that comes later. To start, just internalize the concept of doing one particular task for multiple people. Now, people will pay you in exchange for value. So the task you perform must solve a problem, which will create the value. So now that the concept is simplified, we have a few questions to deal with. What task should I perform? What value will that create? And how do I find a market for it? The answer to these questions are different for different people, and no one can answer these truly but you. And my goal here is to give you the understanding and best practices, in a way the mental tools to answer these questions for yourself. In fact, these are also true and valid if you have already started your business and just trying to grow it. So above everything else is honesty. Honesty to yourself. You have to be honest with yourself. Since we're exposed to so much content on social media every day, you need to have that awareness that the idea that you're chasing is a well-thought one and not something you picked up from a random video. That this is truly what you want for yourself and not something you think will make you easy money. If you're honest with yourself now and clearly define why you want what you want, when the going gets tough, you will persevere. This is why most people fail. This is why I personally have failed on multiple projects as well. Now, if you deeply care about what you do, you'll start falling in love with it. And trust me, you need to love what you do, as it is always a long game. The care and love is exactly what will get you through those really hard times, but you have to be careful. It could be an infatuation. So what I mean is, on a superficial level, most of us are usually convinced of how we will be perceived when we have what we want. Some of us are also aware of the major deliverables within that, but you must love what you do daily, to the point where you would still do it even if you're not getting paid. Let me explain. Say you want to open up a graphic design company. You may have watched hundreds of videos of designers and you really enjoy how creative they are, you like how their offices look, the insane high-speed computers they have lying around, or any of the other 100 things that look cool. This happens to all of us. The second layer is where you like the idea of delivering on projects, like brand kits for clients, building websites, selling courses, and all of that. But the deepest layer, which is often overlooked, is where you look at these daily individual tasks. These are like designing drafts after drafts, conversation with clients going back and forth, business development where there's more rejections than closures, scheduling social media posts. You get the point. It's very important that you think of these things before you start. So have the clarity needed, which will help you be honest with yourself and to know what you love and what you don't. All right, so the next thing is observation. Now, this one's simple, yet kind of hard. When you start, you're trying a lot of new things, and of which some may work and some don't. But it's so important to observe them without jumping into any kind of conclusions. The real learning happens here. If something doesn't work, don't just ditch it. Try and figure out why it didn't work. Can something be changed? Are there parts of the process that are still useful? These observations will give birth to new knowledge, which eventually will become your unique way of doing things. Also, the practice of observation trains your attention, which will improve many other aspects of your life anyway. The next one is about knowing your customers. Validating your idea through user research is echoed by every successful entrepreneur out there, but this is not a step. Instead, it's a practice that is continuous. Basically, you'll have to be in touch with your customers no matter the stage of business you're at. Of course, you should validate your idea with your potential customers when starting out and know if there's a demand for it. But if you create a process, whether that's joining the communities where your customers are or periodically attending events to see them, you'll be able to stay on top of their changing needs and the overall industry trends. By the way, it's okay if you don't understand these things completely. Feel free to leave your questions in the comments. I'll also be making videos on some of these that require a bit more of a deep dive with examples. All right, so moving on. The next one is the idea of being able to market yourself effectively. Now, whether you're trying to build a brand or just one-off projects on the weekends, you need to be able to market yourself. Marketing is truly one of the best skills that one can learn. Cold reach outs, campaigns, SEO, social media, influencers, affiliates, print. There's so many ways and it's constantly evolving. The better you are at understanding the psychology of marketing and the more comfortable you are with it, the easier it becomes to not only start but grow as well. Learn one thing at a time, practice it a lot, put it to use, and keep learning new ones. That's it. All right, so next, let's explore the concept of providing value without expectations. This is not to gain a higher ground or any kind of spiritual revelation. It's just understanding that our expectations are not realistic. If you have done something 100 times, you are then capable of building a realistic expectation. At that point, it's just called confidence. But when you're doing something for the first time, how would you know what to expect? But on these videos where you hear a lot of other people's experiences and just assume that things are going to turn out the same for you, you're deliberately opening yourself up to potential disappointment, and you don't need that when you're starting out. Also, the action of expectation sometimes hinders learning. Since you're anticipating an outcome, you lose focus on what's happening and don't end up taking a note of it. This is not just applicable when you're starting out, but at every step of the business whenever you're trying something new. So don't expect and instead explore. Trust me, it'll be way more fun and so much easier on the anxiety. Next up, you gotta document everything. Ideas, plans, success, failures, you name it. The practice is so essential and fundamental to effective learning. I mean, this is somewhat self-explanatory. The goal here is to keep a notebook handy, whether that's physical or digital, that's completely up to you. Whatever idea realization pops up, just write it down. Sometimes you'll have to deliberately sit down and reflect on what worked and what didn't. And here's the thing, in the moment, it may seem unnecessary, but you will thank yourself later. And this, I promise you. Remember, your brain is to create ideas, not to store them. All right, so lastly, I have a couple that are all the rage nowadays, and mainly because of social media. First one are the productivity apps. They are not the ultimate solution. I personally have used so many of them and still do, and I can assure you that all you need is a way to take notes and a way to remind you of things. Advanced systems, processes, and tools are definitely useful, but should not be the focus when starting a business. The heavyweights out there like Notion, these apps can be extremely daunting and overwhelming, and people tend to spend a lot of time designing their systems, so much so that they never end up doing the actual work. So if you must have an app to help you with your productivity during the first year, just use something simple and structured right out of the box. For example, I use Amplenote for my daily driver, and it works really well, and it's all I need 95% of the time. Second thing are morning routines. Now, don't get me wrong, I think morning routines are useful and essential to start your mornings right. But hey, you don't need a 3-hour long one. I mean, I would love to wake up, stare at the sun, take an ice bath, go for a run, work out, meditate, make healthy breakfast, but then I won't have any time left to get stuff done. You also get a lot of focused work done during the mornings. So you don't want these routines to take up all of the good hours at the start of the day. Also, people tend to beat themselves up when they miss something in the routine. Again, not a great way to start the day. If you must, have a shorter routine, maybe hour and a half, and then just get to work. So that's really it. If you internalize these concepts and go from there, you should be able to get started with building a business. Now, the steps are not super important as there's many variables when you're starting out, and also you need to be flexible to adjust to changes, which will happen quite a bit in the beginning. But I'll give you a general overview of the steps with a disclaimer that these are not necessarily true in all cases, so it's not a blueprint of how to start a business, instead a guide at best. So once you've figured out what business you want to start, figure out the most important skill. Now, if you're not already experienced in it, you need to learn it really, really well. Now, the learning stage, I would avoid comparing with others in the market as that can become taxing on the motivation. Just learn it to the extent you trust yourself with it in a way that you would pay for your own services. And if you can find a mentor during these times, now that will be a cherry on top. Now, once you're somewhat satisfied with the learning, you need practical experience. You need exposure to real-world challenges. The easiest way to do it is to offer your services for free. Now, you may not earn money during this time, but you'll be able to use this experience to build a portfolio, gain credibility, think testimonials and reviews, as those early ones will help you a lot down the line. You'd be able to network, learn client interactions, understand the market. Honestly, it's a no-brainer, and it's highly effective at setting you up with the right foot. All right, so if you did these correctly, you broadly have two options. Depending on your type of services you offer, you can start freelancing, or you may be able to productize it and sell packages. Don't worry too much about this right now, as when the time comes, you'll know what to do. Also, as I mentioned before, I will make videos deep diving into these topics, so stay tuned for those. All right, so if you choose to productize it, this phase will become the ideation and validation stage, where with the knowledge you already have, you try to create the basic concept of it. This is where you need to validate the idea with your current customer base, if you work for free or was paid for it or whatever. And if you don't have a customer base, you would seek out people that would be your ideal customers. There are several ways to do that, starting from online, offline communities, events, focus groups, etc. Once validated, you would go on to create something called an MVP, which stands for minimal viable product. It just means the bare minimum product that'll be enough to get someone to use it, or better yet, pay for it. Now, whether you productize it or started freelancing, you're essentially just started a business. At this point, the challenges will shift towards growing the company. For anyone in this stage, I will be making several videos on scaling businesses, so stay tuned for that as well. That's basically it, guys. Building a business is hard. The only real challenge to overcome here is the expectation of it being easy, and that one can build it over a few months, let alone days. Think about it. Businesses influence the economy, create jobs, create communities. If it was that easy, how do you see yourself becoming someone who can do those things? The most important is the mindset and the internalization of the concepts and best practices. That will generate the direction and motivation. The rest will just follow. It is highly rewarding to start and have a business, and the perks are of course there, but you need patience and the right expectation. If you keep providing value year after year, one day you will gain mastery over the one practice, and that's when it becomes easy. Passion turns into mastery, which becomes second nature and effortless. Good luck, everyone. I'll see you on the next one.